measures that will boost its exports by another $65 billion and create well over 410,000 new jobs. The U.S. Air Force flies 4 F-22 fighter jets through South Korean airspace in the latest show of force against North Korea over its latest provocations. And a 5-year low. The Korean won weakens against the greenback on growing bets the BOK will lower its policy rate and a drop in oil deter risk-taking. News setup begins right now. Good evening to our viewers in Korea. Hello to those around the world. This is News Center. Dump them all out and pick out only those deemed absolutely necessary, says the Korean president of regulations that may stand in the way of nurturing future growth engines. That's how strongly President Park feels about finding the next export industry that would spur the Korean economy. First, here's our Song Ji-san.
Nothing should stand in the way of companies seeking to develop innovative products and new markets, so the government will do its best to relax regulations on potential growth engines. That's what President Park Geun-hye said Wednesday at the first investment promotion meeting of the year.
신산업의 성장을 가로막는 규제로 의심이 되면 정부 입맛에 맞게 골라서 없애는 것이 아니라 일단 모두 물에 빠뜨려 놓고 꼭 살려내야만 할 규제만 살려두도록 전면 재검토하겠다는 취지입니다.
She also said it's important to strengthen the country's economic fundamentals by boosting domestic demand, so that the country's growth isn't held up by falling exports due to slowing global demand. Seoul will also remove as many regulations as possible, except for those deemed essential, to foster new growth engines that can also create quality jobs in various sectors. One of the sectors is sports, expected to grow into a $40 billion market by next year. That's a 20% rise from 2014 and double the size of Seoul's tourism industry. To expand facilities investment in the sector, the government will allow new gyms to be built in areas designated as green belts. Seoul will also allow domestic colleges to build branches overseas to help them export their education services. President Park added that the administration would devise regulations for groundbreaking products like drones and unmanned vehicles after the goods are introduced, as doing otherwise could prevent companies from gaining a foothold in the market during the initial stage of development. Song Ji-san, Arirang News.
And the specifics of just how to prop up the economy as initiated by the president, here's our Hwang Ji-hye.
Uber, Airbnb, and TaskRabbit. These are just 3 examples of the so-called sharing economy that's much larger than some might think. Hundreds of millions of people worldwide are now paid for the work they do within these systems, whether that's by driving an Uber cab or doing small jobs for others through websites like TaskRabbit. The global market size has jumped over 10 times in just 4 years. And to foster this industry, Korea is all geared up to strip back regulations. During a meeting to promote investment led by President Park Geun-hye on Wednesday, the government pledged to cut red tape in not just the sharing economy sector, but also in sports, healthcare, and education, some new service industries that are seen as hopeful candidates for the country's next growth engine. The government also plans to immediately push ahead with investment projects currently stalled due to regulations.
We will help 6 investment projects to be carried out and see a lift of around $5 billion in investment.
All this comes as Korea struggles with local companies that have been losing their appetite for aggressive investment in times of slowing global demand. With exports plunging by the biggest margin last month in nearly 6.5 years, job creation is dulling. The youth unemployment rate hit its highest level in 7 months in January, hitting 9.5%, inching up 0.3 percentage points from the same month a year ago. The overall jobless rate was at 3.7%. So while the growth growth last year mainly came from domestic demand on the back of measures to boost consumption. The government is now hoping to get the corporate sector moving again with a new package that it projects will shake loose around $40 billion worth of investment and create more jobs. 황지혜, 아리랑 뉴스.
The United States is ramping up air defense in response to North Korea's recent nuclear test and missile launch. Now, it flew 4 F-22 stealth fighter jets over South Korea today in a show of force, the strength of ROK-U.S. alliance. This is the third strategic weaponry that's been dispatched to South Korea in recent weeks. Arirang's national defense correspondent, Kim Hyun-bin.
4 F-22 stealth fighter jets flew over Osan Air Force Base, just south of Seoul, on Wednesday. Were escorted by 4 South Korean F-15s and 4 U.S. F-16s. The F-22s were dispatched from the U.S. Air Base in Okinawa this morning as part of a provisional deployment aimed at pressuring North Korea. A South Korean military official says 2 F-22s will be temporarily stationed at the Osan Air Base.
The F-22 Raptor is the most capable air superiority fighter in the world, and its capability represents one of many capabilities available for the defense of this great nation. The U.S. maintains an ironclad commitment to the defense of the Republic of Korea.
In this grave situation, the combined air forces of South Korea and the United States, with the most powerful combat power, are fully prepared to deter and punish North Korea's further provocations.
The F-22 is a key part of Washington's key strategic weaponry and considered one of the best fighter jets in the world. They are equipped with full stealth capabilities. This means they could infiltrate North Korean airspace undetected and destroy the regime's key nuclear and missile infrastructure before the North knew what hit it. Their range also allows them to target anywhere in North Korea when flown from the south. The F-22s are not the first strategic U.S. weapons deployment here in recent weeks. The U.S. flew a B-52 bomber over the peninsula last month, plus the nuclear-powered submarine USS North Carolina docked in Korea's southern city of Busan on Tuesday. The nuclear-powered carrier USS John C. Stennis is also scheduled to take part in the annual South Korea-U.S. defensive drills, Key Resolve and Full Eagle, which start early next month. There's also word a B-2 stealth bomber could also fly over in the coming weeks. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
North Korea can now conduct a nuclear test with little or no advance notice based on imagery observations alone. Now, according to 38 North, a U.S.-based North Korea monitoring site, Pyongyang appears to have altered its test preparation practices in order to make them more difficult to detect, as demonstrated by its fourth nuclear test on January 6th. The site says previous images suggest that the reclusive state may have already finished digging several underground tunnels at its main nuclear test site in Punggye-ri, which would allow them to conduct another test with little or no warning. Meanwhile, South Koreans living abroad have been told not to dine out at North Korean restaurants around the world, although such visits are not illegal. Now, this comes as part of sanctions held up against the North following the recent nuclear and missile provocations. Kim Mo-gun has more. Could impose unprecedented sanctions on North Korea as early as next week. That's according to Seoul's ambassador to the United Nations in New York. Well, council members have been drafting a new resolution against Pyongyang ever since the fourth nuclear test more than a month ago. Kwon So-ah with the details.
Room for negotiation.
If the decision on the strong measures suggested by the U.S., such as a secondary boycott or sanctions on trade or exchanges of human resources, is left for related countries to decide on independently, China could uphold its pattern of consideration for its ally and not accept Washington's view 100%.
Backing up the prospects for a swift adoption of the resolution, an official at Seoul's foreign ministry told reporters after Tuesday's high-level talks between South Korea and China in Seoul that Beijing saw eye to eye with South Korea on sanctions that would hurt North Korea. The official added that the bilateral talks made up a much larger portion of the meeting in Seoul than the possible deployment of the U.S. missile defense system THAAD in South Korea, to which China objects, and that the Chinese side briefed Seoul in detail on the current progress at the UN headquarters. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, Seoul has issued another warning to Tokyo. Do not undermine the agreement between Korea and Japan on the so-called comfort women. Now, this is in response to Japan's latest claim that the Japanese military did not force Korean women into sex slavery during World War II. Our Oh Soo-young reports.
Dongsa University in Busan. Professor Myers, thanks so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Great to be here, Tia.
All right, so let's first talk about economic damages. How much is the closure of the Kaesong Industrial Complex going to cost the two Koreas and their respective economies?
Well, of course, we don't have any exact figures. What we're hearing in regards to North Korea is that it's going to cost Pyongyang about $100 million in annual revenues. And that's probably more in terms of opportunity costs because that sum was going up every year. Now, it's probably going to cost the South Korean players involved, in other words, the insurers, the companies themselves, the South Korean government, a total of perhaps a few $1 billion. And that's, of course, keeping in account the enormous cost of setting up the KIC in the first place. But you need to keep in mind here the enormous difference between the sizes of the two respective economies. The North Korean economy is only about 2% as big as South Korea's. So the pain is really going to be felt much more in North Korea, which is already losing money because exports to China are declining, the price of commodities is declining, and so on. I think it'll also be a devastating blow to that whole Kaesong region. You're talking really hundreds of thousands of families which are dependent on that source of income.
All right, but this isn't the first time that the complex suspended operations. It was shut down back in 2013 after North Korea's nuclear test. So considering the current economic, diplomatic, and security situation, how does this latest closure compare to back in 2013?
Well, it's kind of ironic, really, because this complex was set up in order to facilitate cooperation and conciliation between the two Koreas. And in fact, it's been used really more often by North Korea as a tool to use against the South. And you're right, in 2013, they did shut down the Kaesong Industrial Complex. And back then, there was great uncertainty about whether it was ever going to open again. Now, this time, it's the South Koreans who are doing the closing, and they've been very clear. President Park was very clear on this. It's not going to open again. Now, had the KIC stayed shut in 2013, the South Korean government would not have been on the hook for so much damages. This time around, it's really perceived, rightly or wrongly, as President Park's initiative. So the government here is going to have to do more to compensate the companies involved and also to justify this decision to the rest of the world.
Now, the president also mentioned in her address yesterday that the government has reason to believe that foreign currency that went into Kaesong from the south was being used for the leadership, including for arms development. Office 39 under the Workers' Party is said to be at the helm of all this, so tell us more about this department.
Well, first of all, the Unification Ministry kind of shot itself in the foot by claiming that the money was going directly into armament. It then had to backtrack by saying it didn't have any evidence. So I was a little surprised when President Park repeated that claim without relativizing it a little bit. But, this whole discussion about the money trail is a bit silly in my opinion. I mean, Chi-yun, if I give you $1 and I put it in your left pocket, and you take $1 out of your right pocket and you buy an orange with it, then I paid for that orange, or I at least helped you pay for the orange. So that Kaesong money ultimately gave the Kim regime more money to spend on missiles. But it may well have gone initially or straight to Office 39 instead. Now that is indeed Kim Jong-un's personal foreign currency slush fund. The North Korean dictators have maintained this fund since the 1970s. It's a pretty mysterious affair. It's broken up into various bank accounts in China and in Switzerland. And that's where all the money goes also from illicit operations like drug running and counterfeiting, weapon sales, and things like that. We're talking about $1 billion a year here. So the KIC money is about 10% of that.
Mm-hmm. Now, although much of the talk about sanctions on North Korea now has from Seoul and Washington, it's actually China that holds most of the cards, right? And just yesterday, China said it supports the UN resolution against North Korea's nuclear tests and long-range rocket launch this year. So how far do you think Beijing will go in punishing Pyongyang?
Well, like a lot of people, I have a certain suspicion that China is playing a bit of a double game here. On the one hand,